Thank you very much. What is my opinion of the Anglophone crisis? The moment I listen to your question, the first thing that comes to mind is, are we still calling this an Anglophone crisis? I think we've far surpassed that stage. It is now become very, very clear that Southern Cameroonians are adamant and very decided about wanting to restore their statehood. I know the narrative globally, especially from French Cameroon, but also from its cohorts, continues to push the Anglophone Cameroon agenda. But I think we've far surpassed that. Now, the second question you asked, or the second part of your question was, or is it a crisis? Again, it depends. I remember talking to friends in 2017 at a time when we thought this thing had moved from being just an uprising to a revolution, and he had said, no, MILLAN, that's not an uprising. Now this is a friend from French Cameroon, actually one of the top guys. This is not a revolution. It's just an uprising, and it's only a matter of time. Like every other uprising, it's going to come to an end. And interestingly, by the time we met towards the end of 2017, he was like, MILLAN, you were right. This thing is a revolution. I have never seen a people so decided in terms of where they are going. So I think the use of the terminology crisis depends on who you talk to. Internationally, they might go and talk about the Southern Cameroon or the Cameroon Anglophone crisis, which is still, I think, potent a word when you use it internationally. But where we are in the process of conducting a revolution for change that would restore the statehood of Southern Cameroons. Well, once again, stories and the narrative of it being a language problem has far been surpassed. I think we've demonstrated over the past close to 3 years, that this was never a language problem. If I decide to learn and speak English, then why not learn and speak French? But my problem is not a matter of French or English, because they are both colonial languages. My problem is that of my right as a citizen of the world being taken away from me. And the fight that I am fighting at the moment is about taking back that right and let it belong to me. Well, Scope as a movement is, interestingly, today is the 2nd of June, 2019. Scope is exactly 1 year old today. The launch of Scope took place on the 2nd of June 2018. And as you know, the aspirations of Scope, our political philosophy, has always been consistent, and we're probably the one movement that has been the most consistent so far. How does it align itself to the aspirations of the people of Southern Cameroons? One, the restoration of our statehood. But we also understand that as a people, we have gone through a period of disenfranchisement over close to 60 years, to the point where we don't know, and we are having difficulties distinguishing between what we want and what we don't want. Scope lays a lot of importance on political education. But we also realized, and one of the key reasons why Scope was formed was after the realization that there was a lot of indiscipline in the struggle, in the revolution, where everybody has become an expert. Everybody is a political analyst, everybody is a journalist, everybody is a leader, everybody has got opinions, and everybody wants their opinions to count. To the point where within even the movement, any movement, you have the movement saying one thing and a member of the movement saying another. We believe that discipline is one of the key cornerstones of any political movement, especially when you're in a revolution. If you look at the seven pillars of our manifesto, discipline is one of the key pillars that make up the manifesto. Again, because you cannot lead a revolution where you have 50 people speaking 50 different languages. When I talk about political education, you still hear debate within our community where people say we need a referendum, we don't need a referendum. There's so many disparate voices. So as a movement, Our point is we want to bring as many intellectuals, many people who can contribute as possible to put their heads together and start helping us to craft a common narrative. We don't care if at the end of the day, the narrative that we are able to craft is used by other movements and other groupings. What is important for us is that every single Southern Cameroonian has the same vision as to where we're going. So meeting the aspirations of Southern Cameroonians, political education, discipline, the ground action, which SCOPE has been supporting in its way, diplomacy, which is at the very height of what we do, as well as humanitarian support. You probably know about the work that SCOPE has been doing through its different arms to ensure that we help our people both in ground 1 and in ground 0. Well, some of the things that SCOPE has been able to achieve over the past 1 year. I think for one thing, and you'll notice, I mean, we pride ourselves on being the pace setters, and I'm just talking about the most banal of things that you can think about. Lately, if you notice the number of people who are migrating from WhatsApp to other applications, it's interesting, and we've noticed that every time we decide to migrate, then there is a vast migration of different people who are not necessarily SCOPE. So in lots of ways, we are looking for ways that will zoom into what we need, that will benefit the larger Southern Cameroonian community beyond SCOPE membership. But talking specifically to some of the areas in which we have made contributions to the struggle and where we lead, I'll want to take the humanitarian domain. You would notice that for a long time, a lot of the players out there focused on everything that was trying to position themselves as we are the ones making things happen on the ground. But an area was largely neglected, and that was humanitarian support. And what SCOPE has done over the past year has been to ensure that we have a whole entity that looks at humanitarian support to our people, both on ground 0 but also on ground 1. This includes, for instance, sending NFIs to the people on a regular basis. By NFIs, I mean non-food items. Ensuring that we take care of the hospitalization of our people. Like I've always said, it's easy to go out there and talk about how many soldiers you have and how many soldiers you have on the field and you're sending out to the field. What makes you a truly revolutionary movement is your ability to take care of your soldiers when they are wounded, your ability to take care of your soldiers when they are hungry. And that is where SCOPE is channeling the bulk of its focus. It's not about wanting to take the glory, but it's about making sure that we fill those gaps that are largely neglected. You probably know that the family of Sam Sawyer, who was beheaded by the forces of French Cameroon, had been in hiding until SCOPE stepped in and worked with a local partner to ensure that we find a place of safety for the family, which is what we've been doing for a whole host of families which are in need. At some point, we had one of the leading movements saying that they would channel everything to ground action and in the process neglecting everything else. And so we have made sure that we do not let our people who are in need suffer. That is at the local or domestic level. But once you go global, I think the level of awareness that we've created through the different entities that we've set up, we've been engaging on social media, engaging through Twitter, other forums. We are very, very present, ensuring that we build international awareness of where we are as a people. And there is no denying that the work that we've done over the past year has borne some real fruits. Still within the humanitarian sector, we are in the process of, as you know, helping our people who are in need of protection in the different countries across the world. Today, the membership of the Sam Sawyer Center has grown exponentially as a result of the work that we are doing to ensure that our people get protection in the different countries they find themselves. That's humanitarian. Now, when you look at it politically, the growth that we've had politically over the past 1 year, the videos that we've been churning out, the different interactions, but also the conferences where we've been sending our people, the doors that we've been opening, is out there for everybody to see. Diplomatically, we don't need to talk about it. Last August, we were in Addis Ababa. We were able to start the conversation that brought us to the point where we are. We engaged, and again, and I have to admit that this was far before the birth of Scope, but it is a continuation of the work that we had been doing as far back as 2017. The European Union, now we see the European Union stepping in very powerfully. 2017 September, when we met with the European Union in Brussels, they told us, we've already engaged French Cameroon government, and we've told them, we've indicated our willingness to help mediate between your two peoples. That work that we did, that we've continued to do, is beginning to bear fruits. At the level of the African Union, it is true that it's slow, and sometimes it's embarrassingly slow for us who claim to be Africans, but we continue to do the work that we're doing. In the US, the same thing. We had a series of meetings, and a whole lot of those meetings are beginning to bear fruits. This year, we are actually planning on organizing a number of symposiums, which I think will help to propel our plea for international support to a different level. And in this case, we are looking at the kind of partnerships that we want to forge. Now, if you look at action on, and this is ground action, we as a movement, we've been very, very clear about our position when it comes to self-defense. We do not believe that you need to go and shout, go and shout from the rooftop what you're doing, but rather you do and let your actions speak for itself. And sometimes we find it quite revealing and interesting when we find certain groupings go out there and quickly claim victory for action that we know exactly how it took place. But it is the nature of what we are dealing with. When it comes to ground action, you probably know that we do have our group, actually two groups. There's Scope Men, which is channeling contributions and funding through different groupings, while at the same time we continue to interact with groupings on the ground to ensure that there is harmony and that we continue to propel and push our struggle forward. So yes, we are present in a lot of different domains, from the political, the diplomatic, the humanitarian, and so on. You see, that goes completely against what I have always advocated for. You perhaps remember one of the talks that I gave where I said we need to be careful not to be the proponents of the formation of little armed groupings. This is one of the lessons that we took from 2017 into 2018, where you had little groups and individuals saying, well, I've got my group of boys, I've got my group here and there. Once you do that, you start to create pockets of allegiance, which will eventually come back to bite us. As Scope, we've been very clear. We do not want to perpetuate that culture of creating groupings, which will only help to create factions amongst our boys. So what we are doing is rather looking at whatever groupings are working in harmony with others, and that we know, and I didn't say we think, we know after a lot of research, we are convinced that they are for the struggle. They are not one of those groupings that are set up just to pilfer money from our people, and then we channel our support through them. What's this support? We are strongly in favor of self-defense, and as a result, we ensure, why do we do that? We did not go out there and declare war. We are a people who are defending themselves armlessly against an armed and supported regime that has used all the resources at its availability to destroy our people. We cannot sit back and let the genocide continue. So we channel our support through the groupings that we've identified. They're specific, very quiet, and very focused. And that's how Scope operates. One thing that is very clear, and I've made it clear, is that the day Scope steps up there and says we are going to actively front anything in the area of self-defense, and when I say front, that we take on any kind of grouping and say we own it, is when we know that we can own, we can feed, we can support that group from end to end in a conventional fashion, respecting all the humanitarian principles that go with it. Well, for a movement that was declared dead on arrival, I think everybody can see for themselves how big Scope is. Scope, apart from the support that the interim government has got, there is no doubt in my mind that Scope is the only movement in our revolution right now that has got representation everywhere. On the African continent, on the European continent, on the American continent. Wherever you have our people, Scope has got membership, it's got a presence, and it's registered. It's registered and it operates as a movement and contributes to the struggle. In terms of numbers, again, I would refer you, for instance, if you go to our membership in terms of those who've registered, membership on social media, membership on social media, Facebook and so on, you will see how big our membership is. However, lately, and given some of the lessons we've learned and the continuous attempt to infiltrate our ranks, we've come to the point where we are far more of the opinion that instead of trying to build a movement that is big, vast and gigantic because we want to show how big we are, we rather keep it smaller, tighter, but very focused. And what matters right now is not the size, but rather the results that we churn. So size-wise, we're definitely big, but is size the focus of the movement right now? I would say no. I think, and that has been discussed at the level of the leadership, focus on what you have, consolidate, and then move on. Well, Scope was born at a time when there was a lot of acrimony amongst our people. I'm sure everybody is aware that you had groupings which, instead of focusing on the common enemy, turned their guns and focused on Scope. And for one full year, they've done nothing but that. And of course, that makes a lot of sense. If you're talking about a movement, a group of people who are so solid, so focused, to the point where you start feeling threatened, then you turn all your resources and you try to kill that movement, because you think by killing that movement, it makes you the only bull in the crowd. That is understandable, but is that a revolutionary step to take? We've seen how they've done this. I mean, same group of people are now doing the same to Siseko in jail by slandering and slaughtering his integrity and his personality. That is something you should expect. Anybody who thought that from the very beginning of this revolution to its end, it will be smooth sail, was gravely mistaken. The Yaoundé regime is so dependent on us for its own survival that it will do anything, pay people, plant them in our midst, ensure that it takes over the social media space. So what we've done, as you might have seen, is move away from the social media space, which has been invaded by these paid agents, and focus on conducting our revolution. At the end of the day, it's all about who crosses the finish line. Challenges that Scope has faced has been the challenge of misinformation and disinformation that was propelled and propagated by some of the people who assumably are leaders of the revolution, but we've been able to overcome that. Even the people who had gone out there and told all kinds of, and said, Scope is not going to survive, they now recognize that it is one of the powerful forces of the revolution. But that's not the focus of the movement. Once again, the focus of this movement is to ensure that we lead the people to the finish line. And that finish line is Buea. So challenges are there. Membership within Scope, where we have had to, and we are at the process, we are at the stage where we are going to have to shed some leaves in order for the tree to grow greener and better. So the challenges remain. We continue to deal with those challenges, but one thing for sure that nobody can dispute is the fact that Scope is a force to reckon with. What strategy are we putting in place to have broad-based support? You see, since 2017, I've been firmly of the opinion that we should not strive for broad-based support. There's a revolutionary strategy that we had crafted right from the beginning, and we are sticking to that script. At the beginning of this revolution, it was important that the first phase of it focuses on social cohesion. By social cohesion, what do I mean? You want to ensure that you educate our people. Remember that at the very beginning of the struggle, there were those people who would say, for instance, no, that's your thing, that's your Ambazonia thing. We don't want to get involved. It was important that we bring the critical mass of the people to understand how much we had been shortchanged by French Cameroon and by France as a country. It was important that we are able to bring all our people to have the same vision and to look in the same direction. We succeeded in doing that. That success was registered on the 22nd of September and the 1st of October 2017. But in the process of doing that, we were also setting up a big trap for ourselves. And that trap was the fact that when you fling your doors wide open, you attract good people, but you also attract bad people. You attract the ugly. You attract spies. You attract infiltrators and all kinds of people. The reason why today you have anonymous audios going out on a daily basis, you have people pretending to be one thing that they are not, or let me give you something that we've been looking at for a while. The number of activists who have suddenly taken center stage of our struggle, who in November 2016 when the struggle broke out were not in the diaspora, were on ground zero. Then you ask yourself, who sponsored their trips to the diaspora? How did they manage so quickly to infiltrate the ranks of the diaspora to the point where they are at the center of the narrative and the decision making of everything? And I'm not saying that for somebody who left or everybody who left shouldn't be part of the struggle, but you need to watch those individuals very carefully. There are quite a few of them who are playing a very, very important role of getting into countries completely unknown, and a couple of weeks later they are right in the heart, in the center of leadership discussions. And today, when you look at the people who are churning out audios, who are churning videos, who are driving a wedge amongst our people, many of them are such individuals. So we recognize then, at least I did, that after building social cohesion, it was time to move to the second phase of our revolution, which was internationalization. But one thing that has stalled that for the whole of 2018 has been the fact that our ranks have been infiltrated. As SCOPE, we've been very, very clear about the fact that our doors are not open to everybody. Because we know when we had the governing council and then eventually the interim government, every single facet of these groupings have been infiltrated. We know some of them, and probably we don't know some. Now, as a movement, we are moving away from the notion that everybody must come with you before you can cross the finish line, but rather to say, not everybody is a revolutionary. Not everybody is genuinely concerned with this cause. Not everybody goes out there to pass out a message of encouragement. Many go out there to rather slaughter and slander. And so we have taken 1 year of which we have sat back and looked at each and every individual within our ranks, and we are able to separate the boys from the men. So back to your question, what strategy are we ensuring, what are we putting in place to ensure that we have broad-based support? That is not part of our strategy. Our strategy is in identifying the key people who will drive this revolution to the finish line. At the end of the day, it's very clear in my mind. It's not about the numbers, it's about the quality. So we have been rather deliberate about making sure that certain people do not become part of SCOPE, because we know not everybody who comes into our midst is a friend. Many are planted, many are infiltrators, many are paid agents. So we tend to have a completely different approach and direction. Remember when Fidel Castro talked about him starting the revolution with 82 men? If he knew better, he would have started with 27. And that's exactly what we're doing. I don't think it was a mistake to build the social cohesion that we did in 2017, but by building that social cohesion, there were loopholes. Those loopholes were used by the enemies to infiltrate us. We recognize that. At the time when SCOPE was being formed, there were those who said, oh, SCOPE was formed at the wrong time. No, the timing was not right. Or it was wrong to form another movement. Today it's becoming clearer and clearer to everybody that we saw very far when many were still behind. Today they are catching up. So the question for me is not so much about the building of a big mass movement, but rather what kind of quality of individuals do we want to bring on board. At the end of the day, whether you like it or not, we've got an extremely gullible people. If you look at the way things are working within the revolution, our people tend to swing with the wind. Whichever way the wind blows, they swing with it. 6 months from today, we will eventually hit the point that we want to hit. And once we start leading and moving, people will follow. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much you talk. It's about how much you achieve. And once you achieve, everybody wants to be your relative. I think my position on the formation of a government has been clear right from the very beginning. I've never moved, but I've respected the opinion of others, and I've respected the position of the majority. And like we say, if you want to build a democratic society, it doesn't matter how much you think you are right, you respect their position. Formation of a government was not the right thing to do. I've written an article on that. I've elaborated quite clearly why going the government route was going to be. It's not a bad thing per se, but it's about how it takes away attention from driving a revolution to rather jostling and fighting for positions. Secondly, you would recall, if you were following this revolution from the beginning, and you've been following very closely, that from the days of Skakov through to the governing council, there was greater participation because there was greater ownership. It wasn't an accident. When I sat down to put together the concept, which we then shared with the leaders and they bought, and I want to applaud some of our comrades in South Africa who were part of this whole conception, the mechanism. One thing was clear. The leaders of the uprising at home had been arrested. Neba Fontem and Agbobala had been arrested. There was a lot of confusion and despondency. Many people have said, oh, maybe the idea of going through the frontline movements was not the right one. I cannot think of any other thing that we could have done at that stage that was not through the frontline movements. It was completely new. Many of the frontline movements were almost defunct. We brought life to them. But it was important at that stage to put the fear of the ancestors in the regime in Yaoundé. And that's what we did. We were able to bring the different frontline movements. And my argument at the time was, instead of creating this entity with somebody that is sitting, or somebody who's championing alone and taking decisions alone on behalf of everybody, let's bring all the different frontline movement leaders, which is what we did with the first and second conclave. Every frontline leader would sit on the table, and they'll have equal voices around the table. Then you can select amongst themselves, they can select one person who becomes the voice, who becomes the face, who becomes the representative, the spokesperson kind of the leadership. And so no decision gets taken by one individual, but rather the leadership sits and takes decision, and that one person who is the face then goes out there and pronounces on behalf of the leadership. When you do that, you avoid unilateral decision making by one individual. You minimize the chances that one person can make mistakes. But when you have several heads around the table, then you have several heads thinking and coming up with solutions and ideas which are greater than one head. And the other issue which for me was problematic was that the moment you create a government, and at the time the argument was, oh, we want a prime minister in exile. You have a prime minister. The prime minister appoints 7, 8 people. And then what you have now is this structure that is up there, and the rest of the masses down here. When you have movements which all have their members, and every movement has got its leader sitting here, and the leader have got a spokesperson, then what you have is that there is synergy and connection between each movement and the leadership. Movement members contribute to their movements, the movements contribute to the discussion of the leadership, and you ensure that you're taking everybody along. What has happened is that from the moment you put in place a government, if you're lucky and you have a good leader, he consults. if you get, and at some stage in every democracy everywhere in the world, the moment you have a bad leader, he doesn't consult. He takes decisions alone. His phone is cut off. You cannot say anything to him. He decides on your behalf, and if you say, and if you're one individual who's not content with what he's saying and you raise your voice, he hits you back. And that's what we are facing today. So a lot of the things that I was afraid would happen if we go that route is happening as we speak, because we are now having people who all of a sudden cannot distinguish between themselves as an individual and him as the representative of a government. I am the government is me. If I say, then everybody follows. That's where we are. So was it a mistake? Back to your question. Was it a mistake to transition from the SCACOV to the Governance Council and then to a government? I think yes. The major, most successful movements, revolutionary movements across the world from time immemorial did not go out there and call themselves governments. They were movements, they had leaders. When you have a country, you're running it, you put your president, you put your prime minister, you put your king, whatever you want to put in there. One of the biggest problems of a so-called government is that you're not recognized, you're not endorsed. As a result, you cannot even approach other governments and talk to them. So you are this entity that is sitting in the air and nobody's interacting with you. But as COPE, we have been to a number of countries and we've been able to interact with the leadership of those countries, including at the highest level of the government, because they can justify why they are meeting with us. It's a movement to a movement. If we go to, I don't know what country, NFC, party, revolutionary movement, the party can argue that even though we are the party in power, as a movement, we have the right to meet with other movements, be they revolutionary movements, be they pro-independence movement, and so on. But you cannot go out there and say, I am the president of Sierra Leone. I'm going to meet the president of Southern Cameroons. Because diplomatically, it's impossible. So what we've done is that we've created a white elephant, and we sit every morning and we worship it. And all our mind and our eyes is turned towards that white elephant, while the world around us keeps turning. So as a movement, I am not saying that we should disregard the interim government, the IG as it is. But what I'm saying is that it's got lots of shortcomings. And whether you like it or not, it has taken us far more backwards than taking us forward. I think as a movement, we have gone through phases. The first phase was just to go out there and educate as many people as possible. Remember a time when at the formation, the very beginning of the movement, we had individuals who want us to cross the line together, spent vast amounts of their time doing nothing but poisoning the minds of our people and giving them information, a lot of misinformation about SCOPE. So where we are as a movement is, we have transitioned from that period where we had opened our doors to everybody, and we are now being very selective of who we want to become a member of SCOPE. And when I say open our door to everybody, even then we were quite restrictive in terms of our membership. Now we've gone even further to say you can't be a member of SCOPE and you're a member of 7 different movements or 7 different actions. You're SCOPE, you're SCOPE. You're not SCOPE, you're not SCOPE. How do you become a member? Same processes, like I said, across the major continents of the world. We have SCOPE membership, we've got SCOPE leadership. There is a chairperson for SCOPE America. There is a chairperson for SCOPE Europe. There is a chairperson for SCOPE Africa. You want to be a member, you go through these various chairpersons. But then membership is not just about registering and paying your dues as a member. It's about what value do you add to the movement. And by value, we think as a small movement, we want to see each and every member take a role and play a role. Because SCOPE is not just about membership, but it's about leadership. And so registration, membership, participation, and discipline. We are very confident that within the next year, and I say this because a lot of people are rushing and they're thinking, hey, in a month or 2, there's going to be negotiations and we'll be in Boya. We are a lot more realistic. 3 years ago, I sat down and I crafted the strategy for the struggle. I crafted a 3-year action plan and said, this is how I think we should move from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. The people who were pushing for the prime minister in exile say, you see, MILLAN does not want us to be in Buea by the 1st of October 2017. Here we are in 2019 and we are nowhere close to Buea. No revolution in the world, never, and it's not going to be ours that is going to succeed within 2 or 3 years. Very often it takes longer. So we are quite conscious of the fact that this thing is a marathon, not a sprint. Ultimately, those who are sprinting are going to get tired. We will go slowly, confidently, but we know where we're going. So membership, it's all about those people who can think and see long term. Well, I don't think we are, I don't think that SCOPE insists that to be a member you must only be a paid member. Paying your membership, registering as a member and paying your dues is what makes political movements. Even some of the most wealthy political movements today, and we talk about our ANC. The ANC, if you look at the results of the elections in South Africa 2 or 3 weeks ago, ANC garnered close to 60% of the votes, but the actual members of the ANC are just about 4 million people. That is that's less than 10%, less than 8% of the South African population. The difference is that when it comes to voting and decision making within the ANC, only those who are registered members can vote and take decisions. That does not cancel the participation and the ownership of the ANC of those people who are not registered and fully paid up members of the ANC. The same operates for SCOPE. We are not closing the door to those who are not registered or do not pay their dues. But what we are doing is saying the membership is going to be of 2 kinds. For you to hold position within SCOPE, you need to have paid your dues and you're up to date with your dues. You need to be registered. You cannot be, we had a senior member of the movement, quite senior, who had never even paid their registration. You can't be a member of a movement and you're not even registered with the movement. So how we have managed to solve that is that at the global level, anybody can come in there and be a member. In terms of decision-making levels, then you need to be registered and up to date. Back to your question, what then prevents somebody from infiltrating SCOPE leadership simply because they've paid their dues or they are registered? Not really. Nothing can prevent people from infiltrating. In fact, we've been infiltrated before. Just like every other movement, we know that people try to infiltrate and we watch. The difference is that after 2 years of experience, 2-3 years almost of experience, we now know the vast majority of the people in our community. That is the reason why as SCOPE, we have created a movement whose leadership is built following the structure of the onion. And I think we've spoken about that. We've adopted an onion layered structure. The outside layer of the onion or the movement is made up of everybody, anybody and everybody who wants to come on board. But as you go deeper into the onion, we are more restrictive. Membership is more restrictive, and you only become a member within the deeper part of the onion, depending also of your demonstrated loyalty, commitment, and engagement with the movement and for the movement. So we are not so concerned about infiltration. In fact, what we are doing now is going to the inner layers of the movement and as much as possible taking out the people and the individuals we think should not be there because they have demonstrated over the past 1 year that they are not loyal to the movement. Am I a nationalist or a federalist? That's me as an individual.
Yes.
You see, I believe in tolerance. I believe in debates. I believe in listening to others. The problem that we have, and the reason why we are not moving forward, is tied to a number of things. And let me start from the number 1 element. The one reason we are not moving forward is because the movements and the individuals who purport to lead movements depend on the general masses for the financing of their movements. So as a result, we tend to tear each other down because I need to pull you down in order to take the position, and then people can contribute to me. Scope as a movement, we don't suffer from that complex because we are not looking at mass generation of resources. We are very, very targeted and specific in terms of where we want to get our resources, because we want to be we want to be independent in our thinking and be more innovative. That's number one. Now, we tend to have built a community generally right now that is extremely intolerant, to the point where if you say something that I do not agree with, then immediately I term you and I castigate you and I tag you as being something that is negative. So, am I a nationalist or a federalist? I think I've always been very, very clear as to where I stand in terms of, the nationalist, I'm very, very strongly for the restoration of our statehood as a country that was recognized and achieved its independence in 1961. But at the same time, I'm making it clear that we should listen to everybody, because it is only by listening to everybody that we are able to pick up where are the weaknesses in our arguments, where are their strengths that we need to learn. I learned something early enough that has been part of my philosophy as a person. Yasser Arafat, who was the leader of the PLO, and eventually, and remember, Yasser Arafat never called himself president of the PLO of Palestine until Palestine was given its statehood. Then he was called president. Yasser Arafat always told the story of how he grew up. And as a boy, he would go to the synagogues of Jerusalem and sit there and watch the Jews pray and interact and do business. And he got a hiding every time from his father. Every time his father caught him sitting there and watching and gaping at the Jews, he would say, "What's wrong with you? What kind of son do I have who spends his time hankering after what the Israelis have got instead of building what you have as a community?" But his answer was a very, very clever one. He said, "For me to fight against the domination of the Jews in my country, I need to first of all understand who the Jews are. One, how they operate and how they think." The problem we have as a people, as Southern Cameroonians to this point, has been the tendency to build a cocoon, and then we sit within this cocoon and we fight with each other every day, day in and day out. While we're doing that, the rest of the world is going on. People are going about their businesses. The world is turning. The international community is talking about us. But when the international community talks about us, they talk about us as if they're talking to a bunch of retarded 5-year-olds. No, not two. They're talking about a bunch of retarded 5-year-olds, because they don't even interact with us. We are there doing whatever we're doing, and they're sitting there and they're looking at those retarded children and thinking, "Oh my God, this is the decision we take for them." We are not invited to the discussion tables. We are not invited to the places where decisions are made. Why? Because of that cocoon that we've created. Scope is all about breaking away from that cocoon and be able to talk to everybody and say, "You've got federalist tendencies. Why? Give us your reasons why." And then we have a robust debate fearlessly, and then we're able to tell you. And more, you're having people who have moved from that federalist kind of thinking to now, they are now radical nationalists, because over time they've been educated. And it is only by educating and building that we eventually get all the people to be on our side. Now, I've said it, I joined the different groupings that had discussions on our independence as far back as 2001, actively. And I've been a member in all those forums to this day. People go on and talk about self-defense. I started advocating for self-defense as far back as 2003 or 2004. Those same people today who are saying, "Oh, we see, now he doesn't want," they are the champions and the proponents of self-defense, were the ones in those groups who were chiding me for saying, "You cannot mention such a thing in this forum." That's how far back it goes. And I'm not even talking as far back as 1994, when I was arrested and jailed because of this struggle. So you will, again, we've created a cocoon, And within this cocoon, we help to tear each other down. Now, I've got one of two options. I can help to tear all the others down, or I continue to focus on the bigger enemy, who's more powerful, has got more resources, has got more time, and has got everything in their favor. We can always deal with the little things later. But am I going to go out and do what others are saying because somebody believes that we should rather go the federalist route? Am I going to go out there and condemn them and call them enablers and traitors? No, of course not. I have to respect their opinion. And the only way that I can gain their respect is by getting them to understand why I argue that the only way forward is for us to have a country of our own in which we have complete say and decision making. So I believe in the power of persuasion rather than the power of castigation and everything that's negative.